Welcome, everyone. My name is Tim, and this is Tommy Highway, and we're here to discuss new geoglyphs found in Peru or new Nazca lines and UFOs and extraterrestrials found throughout ancient and historical artwork. So, we want to welcome you to our stream, and we will get to your questions after we do a little bit of our own spiel. So, Tommy, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. And hello, everybody. Welcome back to the stream. What's one of the biggest things that separates the human species from every other species on the planet? I mean, there's all kinds of animals out there, and some of them actually show pretty good intelligence. I mean, I've caught my cat and dog thinking about things before. But what sets us apart is that we are the creators. We create things, okay? I'm talking about we create art, we create literature, even up to monuments. We create grand buildings, things of that nature, okay? Now, the thing about it is, through written history, we have a pretty good idea of when something was built, why it was built, and its purpose for being built. Let's take, let's say, the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Okay, we know when that was built, why, and by whom, and what it's for. We know that because we have written history to be able to fall back on. Now, what happens when there are monuments that predate written history? Then the line of fact and it becomes blurred at that point. Okay, so then we only have investigation, speculation, and theory, and that's all we have. Now we're talking about the Nazca lines today, and for those of you who are not aware of what the Nazca lines are, they're a series of geoglyphs and straight lines on the coast of Peru that were made. There's some argument about this, but they were created somewhere around the time of Christ to about 700 or so years after. So they've been there for a really long time. Now, we didn't even know about these things until 1927, when an archaeologist stumbled upon them on the ground. He was on land, and he was walking, exploring, or whatever, and he found these things. Okay, and it was years later that, after we took to flight and all of that, flight became something that was very common, especially in that area of the planet. We noticed that there were actual glyphs, actual shapes that were dug into the ground. And we're talking about things like animals, a spider, a thunderbird, a hummingbird, various different things. Now, the question is, we're pretty sure we know who did it. That was the Nazca people. And they were people that lived, like I say, right after the time of Christ, or right about in that area somewhere. But why? Why would they do this? Why would they build this? So Tim's got a video he's going to go ahead and run, and we're going to go ahead and get some different takes on this, and then I'll tell you my theory.
Okay, let me cue this up here. Okay.
There were secret societies that were involved.
Whoops, hold on, that's a commercial.
Country. Who were
Wait
they?
till it's
and
done.
What were they trying to?
Etched into the high desert of southern Peru more than a millennium ago, the enigmatic Nazca lines continue to capture our imagination. But recently, using drone cameras, scientists have discovered new spectacular line drawings in southern Peru, and they are much older than the famous lines of the Nazca province. Until this recent discovery, we knew of more than 1,000 of these line drawings, also known as geoglyphs, or ground drawings, that sprawl across the sandy soil of the Nazca province, a little understood practice that some believe was to encourage rainfall, whilst others think they may represent star constellations, although all the ideas remain speculative. Now, Peruvian archaeologists have discovered more than 50 new examples of these mysterious desert monuments in the adjacent Palpa province, traced onto the Earth's surface in lines almost too fine to see with the human eye. With the help of drones, archaeologists have mapped them in never-before-seen detail. Scientists flew the drones over the region about 30 meters above the ground, and of the 50 new geoglyphs, 25 were previously unknown, and the other 25 were only known to local populations. Many of the newfound lines were created by the Paracas and Tapara cultures between 500 BC and 200 AD, which would make them older by many centuries than the famous Nazca lines in the neighboring province. Unlike the renowned Nazca lines, which are etched into the high desert sand and are only visible from above, the older Palpa geoglyphs were found on the slopes of the region's hills, meaning they could also be observed from the villages below. The two cultures also clearly pursued different artistic subjects. The Nazca examples were often lines and polygons as well as animals, and according to a report published in National Geographic, the newly discovered geoglyphs are generally geometric figures portraying humans, apes, and also a whale. Peruvian archaeologist Luis Castillo Butters says, "Most of these figures are warriors. These ones could be spotted from a certain distance, so people had seen them, but over time they were almost completely erased." The new geoglyphs add crucial data on the Paracas culture, as well as the more mysterious Tapara culture, which marked the transition between the Paracas and the Nazca. The Paracas culture, which emerged around 800 BC, was ruled by priests. And as well as geoglyphs, they also constructed pyramids and made key advances in the production of ceramics and textiles. We now know that the tradition of creating lines and pictures in the ground has a far more ancient history, and researchers hope that documenting this newly found line art will give them new insight into the area's ancient cultures. Peruvian archaeologist Johnny Ayla Cuadrado said the massive drawings seem to point to a tradition of over 1,000 years old that precedes the famous geoglyphs of the Nazca culture, and which opens the doors to new hypotheses about their function and meaning. Interestingly, the discovery of the new geoglyphs was only made possible because of threats to previously known Nazca lines. In December 2014, the environmentalist group Greenpeace staged a protest just feet away from the famous Nazca hummingbird, which caused considerable damage to the area. This resulted in Peru receiving a grant from the US to hire a restoration team. One of the main problems for the restorers was the fact that of the 100,000 archaeological sites in Peru, only about 5,000 of them have been properly documented on the ground, with even fewer mapped from the air. So the team brought drones in to start mapping and cataloguing the area, which revealed never-before-seen and unexpected geoglyphs carved into the desert crust. But how could so many geoglyphs hide in plain sight for so long? Well, the newly identified ground markings are long and skinny, merely inches across and as long as a football field, and over time, many of them have been reduced to faint depressions in the soil, visible only on 3D scans of the terrain captured by the drones, which can reveal far more detail than satellites. Now that researchers have documented the newfound lines, they are eager to protect them. They fall within the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and luckily, they are not under immediate threat. But these new lines may just be the tip of the iceberg. Peruvian archaeologists have identified hundreds of new potential sites to survey with the drones, and it's very likely that we are about to see countless more ancient geoglyphs come to light. A lost chapter of Peruvian history has certainly been discovered, and the new findings are sure to fill in the gaps of South America's incomplete historical timeline. Documenting the discovery is one thing, but interpreting these enormous geoglyphs is certainly another, and will no doubt lead to huge amounts of debate and discussion as researchers work to unravel this ancient mystery.
Okay, that was a video talking about the 143 brand new geoglyphs discovered outside the Nazca lines. And they are attributed to the Paracas people that supposedly lived prior to the Nazca. And these smaller, thinner geoglyphs are actually a hint at some of the oldest drawings in the earth ever discovered. And it gives us an idea of how people lived back then. What do you think, Tommy? You're muted.
Sorry about that. There are a lot of theories on how and why they were created. What's interesting about it is if you look at these things from both cultures, think about the time and the manpower and the sheer engineering of a primitive people to be able to want to create something like this. You have to understand that these people had no concept of human flight whatsoever. So why would they just build and design and create something that can only be seen from the air? Now, I've heard theories of, well, it's irrigation systems. Well, if it's an irrigation systems, maybe some of the straight lines, okay, I could probably buy that. But animal shapes, and we're talking about warrior shapes and things like that. Now, this is on my own personal theory, but it's one that I've never actually heard before. I either think that they were trying to pay homage to whatever god they worshipped, or it could be something else. And that something else is perhaps they were trying to scare something away. Maybe they were trying to either communicate with or scare something away that comes from the sky. And since animals would have no use for these Nazca lines, they wouldn't know what they were looking at. Probably not animals. So again, just the sheer size of these lines, of this whole area, is just unbelievable. And I'm sure, think about how many lives it probably cost them to create something like that. Why would they go to all that trouble?
I have a couple questions about those lines too. It has been stated in a lot of literature that I've read in regards to Nazca lines that when they made the lines, what they did is they removed the dark rock from the ground to make the white lines.
Mm-hmm.
They had to remove that rock. Well, where did it all go? Where did all that material go? They couldn't have just thrown it off to the side because there are lines every which way. So where did that material go? How did they remove it? The other thing is that I have to ask is, can you figure out in your own mind how they kept these lines straight over a long distance? Some of these lines were over a mile long.
Right.
How did they keep them geographically straight and then create images? Some of the images may have been a little bit distorted or actually I would call them a bloated version of the actual creature. But in regards to the spider, for instance, how did they get the spider so accurate from the ground?
Without a spotter in the air, how do you do something like that?
So the theory is that back then, perhaps they even had some type of technology, like a balloon even, to actually go above and help them determine where to put the lines. Because even if you use a grid pattern, it's going to be difficult to keep something exactly perfect, like the spider, for instance, or even the Thunderbird, which was incredibly difficult to create.
Sure.
And so, hold on a second. I may have a picture of that. Let's see if I can find it. The spider, let's see if I can find it. There's the spider.
Look at that. Look at the geometry of it. I mean, think about that. It's not perfect, but it's real close. I mean, especially from ground level, for God's sake.
This spider was supposedly over 2.5 miles long from one end of one leg to the end of the other leg. 2.5 miles. So how did they keep that exact?
Yeah.
Now it looks like maybe they coordinated it with that one guideline on the right, that one angle line that's kind of angled there. Perhaps they used that. I don't know. But it appears to be that they had to have done something from the air. Something had to have helped them from the air. And then these images had to be there for someone from the air to visualize, someone to see it from the sky.
Right.
So like Tommy was suggesting, it's a very good possibility that they were trying to scare someone away. I know that a lot of channels have postulated the idea that these images were an homage to the gods. Now, that could very likely be. But
Sure.
then again, it could also be a warning saying, look, we've got giant spiders here in the desert. Mess with us and you may get bit. So that's just an idea.
By and large, I think they could be considered a threat. I mean, in the older lines as well, warrior figures. I mean, these are things that are meant to convey strength.
Right. Here's a warrior figure, I think. This was actually called the Spaceman because it looks like he's wearing a helmet. But then again, it could be a warrior. It could be a warrior. Actually, right now, concerning the Nazca lines, even after all the studies and universities and people that have been out to the sites, after all the literature and everything that I've read and seen and all the documentation and videos everybody's watched, I think we're still in a state of speculation when it comes to the Nazca lines.
Absolutely.
We do not know where they came from, other than that we know that the Nazca had something to do with it. Now, if you imagine that this is from the base of a mountain to almost the peak, that's how big this spaceman is.
They had to scale the face of a mountain to carve that into it. I mean, think about that.
Why? What's the point?
Right. It's an effort that would take a civilization and as a whole to be able to pull off. Why would they want to do that? Right.
Let's see here. How about this one here? This is one of the new geoglyphs that was found recently. This is supposedly a killer whale, an orca, and it was found on a mountainside. Look, it's covering several different valleys and
elevations,
different elevations, and they had to coordinate this to actually come out with what looks like, well, it kind of looks like an alligator to me, but
right.
They said it's not, it's an orca, it's a killer whale. So imagine what they had to do to come out with something like that. It's just incredible. So here's some more. I have some more. Okay, there's the original whale on the Nazca lines. This is a Nazca line attributed geoglyph, meaning the Nazca people made this one. Even though the lines are narrow like the ones from the other group of citizens, this is a different group, the Nazca. Okay, I do have... Okay, there's the monkey, the famous monkey. Now, the monkey has been kept up. It has been kept up by the locals to brighten the lines. That's why they're extremely white. They keep removing the rock so that it is revealing the arid white underlying rock strata so you can see the monkey really well from the air. Okay, let's see here. This here is the hummingbird. You got anything to say about the hummingbird there, Tommy?
It's just, I mean, it's amazing the size of it. And again, I keep going back in my mind to, okay, these people were primitive. I mean, they didn't even have mapping skills, okay? They certainly had no heavy equipment. They had no explosives. They didn't have anything that we would use. I mean, we're talking about any time in the modern era to do this. And again, this is like, I mean, think of how many lives back then that creating that thing right there probably cost.
Right. And at one time, I know in the early years of deciphering these lines, they had thought originally that this hummingbird image was actually like an airport because these wings, or the tail and the wings, were actually runways where the planes would park or the aircraft would park, and the long beak would be where they would land. And the center area was the the area where they would turn around and do what they needed to do. But they thought this was an ancient airport. And then it turned into the hummingbird once they saw it from the sky. Let's see here. That's the monkey. There's another image of the spider. You can see again how big it is. This here's the thunderbird.
Amazing.
It's amazing how big this is and how accurate each part of the bird is, and how it's lined up. I mean, how do you do that without something in the sky helping you out?
No spotter. It just doesn't seem possible. It really doesn't.
Right.
But yet there it is, you know?
Yep, there it is. It's just amazing. Okay, let's see here. There's the spaceman again. Okay, this one here is known as the hands, but I've also heard it being called the small bird.
Chicken. Yep.
Up here's the head. Here's the beak on the right. It's like a wing tucked under, and these are the feet. This one alone is 5 miles in distance from the tip of the longest finger to the top of the head. 5
Enormous.
And it's not on flat ground. This is going up the side of a mountain. It doesn't appear to be on a mountain, but it is. This one's on the side of a mountain. So this one had to be incredibly difficult to create. And why would they do this? Now, there have also been other ideas postulated that these are kind of like those mazes that people walk in, say, for instance, in the United States here, I have some friends that go to these pagan sites, and they walk these mazes to contemplate their life and to meditate. They walk the maze, and it's actually a stone circle, a circle made on the ground. And as you walk it, it creates a path. And after a while, that path is etched into the ground and it becomes a circle. Well, perhaps these sites are attributed to a religious ceremony where they continue to walk this shape, and it becomes these pathways, which then become these giant geoglyphs. Just an idea, just a theory. Okay, what do you got? Anything, Tommy, or should I play the second video?
Let's go ahead and go into the second video.
Okay, let's see here. I gotta. All right, second video. I gotta cue it up here. And we'll go ahead. Okay, share. They should make it where it goes automatically here. Let me get rid of this geoglyph. And here we go.
A team of Japanese researchers from Yamagata University and IBM Research.
What the heck? Hold on, man. Hate these commercial breaks.
Have discovered an incredible 143 stunning geoglyphs etched into the desert in southern Peru, around the enigmatic Nazca lines. It is yet another example of how technology is assisting archaeology, because a number of the images were found using state-of-the-art AI technology that was developed by IBM, finds that were then confirmed with on-site investigations. The geoglyphs include humans, birds, camels, cats, and other animals, and were found between 2016 and 2018. They are identified through fieldwork, analysing high-resolution 3D data and aerial photography. Incredibly, one geoglyph in particular was solely discovered with AI technology, without the aid of humans, making it the first geoglyph discovered by an AI. This glyph is one of the smaller ones, 5 meters long and depicting the human form. The head of the research, Masato Sakai, a professor who specializes in anthropology, told the media that the geoglyphs are concentrated on the west side of the plateau, on a piece of land that stretches 10 kilometers north to south. To put that into perspective, the Nazca Plateau is 20 kilometers east to west and 15 kilometers north to south. Back in April 2018, I reported in a video that Peruvian archaeologists in the Palpa province of Peru had discovered more than 50 new geoglyphs. So this new discovery by the Japanese team builds on this ever-expanding line of study. Back as early as 2010, various on-site inspections were conducted and aerial photographs were taken, and the experts were sure there were far more geoglyphs than was previously thought. And thanks to technology, they have now been able to confirm this. The glyphs are believed to date back from around 100 BC to 300 AD, and some extend to more than 100 meters in size. Furthermore, although 143 new geoglyphs have been confirmed, AI analysis of the aerial footage showed that there are in fact 500 candidate sites, so many new discoveries are yet to be confirmed. To end this video, I'll show you the pictures of the new finds that have been released to the media, with a caption for each. But of course, everything is open to interpretation, so please give your thoughts, observations, and comments below.
This looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah, that looks like a cat. I don't know what to think about that one. Yeah, it looks like the one at Nazca. That looks like a, I don't know. Yeah.
We call it a parrot, maybe?
Yeah, maybe a parrot. Especially that one, maybe.
Yeah, definitely some kind of a bird, a hawk, maybe.
There you go. That looks like a llama.
Antelope or something. Yep.
Whale.
Yep.
I don't know, dogs?
Pack of wolves, maybe.
Yeah, that could be. Fish?
Yep.
Oh, that could be the coelacanth. The one with the 6 fins? The one that was just rediscovered recently that was prehistoric?
Could be.
Okay.
Well, that was very interesting for sure.
Those were some of the new lines that were discovered, and we wanted to bring them out here exclusively on the UFO Man Live channel. I haven't seen them in any other videos other than these two that we have presented this evening, and they are a very significant discovery and leads credibility to the Nazca lines as well.
Sure. It makes you wonder if those two peoples don't have some sort of a common ancestry or something like that. Why are they both doing the same thing? I mean,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
and again, think about it like this. Back in those days, you didn't have modern agriculture, obviously. Basically, if you had a large civilization, it was probably starving or just about that far away from doing that. So you had very limited resources in food and things of that nature. So if you look at these glyphs, especially like the rock face ones and all that, they had to scale that rock face to be able to put that in there. So think about the engineering with the limited resources that they had to put together to be able to pull something like that off. I mean, again, I just keep going back to this would be the effort of an entire civilization. Like they had to be almost dedicated to create these things for some reason. Like they really wanted to do it for whatever reason.
I'm having trouble with my stupid keyboard. Right. Forget it. All right. Going into the chat, Survivor Girl said, I mean, legit question, what significance did Peru or the area have back then? I don't think it had. Well, we had the Nazca civilization, and they basically had their rites and rituals that they performed, and we think that, according to research, that these big geoglyphs were part of that ritualistic lifestyle. So, in regards to Peru, especially around the Lima area, which is where the Nazca lines are, they were very ritualistic, kind of like the Aztecs and the Mayans, who were very ritualistic. So that would be the best way I could answer your question, Survivor Girl. What existed in the Peru when these are dated back to, I would say a civilization existed about 2,000 years ago. Why did the civilization end? No one seems to know. No one seems to know what happened to the Nazca, where they went. It's kind of like what happened to the Mayans.
Right.
Has anyone ever considered that maybe the giant adults were drawing pics to teach their giant children about life? Well, that's possible if giants actually existed in Peru. I haven't heard any research indicating that giants were in Peru, but then again, that doesn't mean that they weren't. You are correct, Survivor Girl. That may answer some questions how they did things. You're right. I tried to type in the word right about 8 times and it didn't work. So I apologize. In regards to the civilization concerning Nazca, it was very advanced. I mean, they were building pyramids for gosh sakes. They were building structures, and like Tommy said earlier in his intro, they were building monuments. Mm-hmm. They were being creative. They had pottery. They had advancements in metalwork. They were able to create jewelry. They were doing a lot of things that were advanced. And then they also were skilled in mummification of their dead. So all I can say is the Nazca were advanced. What happened to them? No clue. I've done my research, and they just seem to have dwindled out, just disappeared. Now, science and archaeology and things of that nature cannot explain what happened to the Nazca.
Only theories.
Yeah, there's only theories. And Diane Moore says at one time all the land was connected, so it's possible they could walk anywhere they wanted. Yes, they could have left. They could have left the arid place that they were living in, perhaps for somewhere more lush, more green. That could
have been famine, could have been disease,
could have been
natural disaster of some kind. I mean,
right.
They began to migrate.
It could have actually killed off the population. That very well happened. I mean, there's any number of things that could have happened. So if we were to say, oh, they left because of disease, or oh, they left because they were taken away, or they left because they walked over a landmass, that would be 100% speculation. So we do not have an ironclad answer for that.
And we can certainly tell that there were a lot of them at one point, because it would have taken a lot of them to be able to create these things. The Nazca lines and all the shapes and everything. That's a serious amount of manpower.
Yes, it's a serious. Oh, and in regards to the Nazca lines, there's one part of the Nazca plain that has a mountaintop that was removed. An entire mountaintop was removed and made flat. Well, where did they remove all that dirt and rock? How did they get rid of it? Something technologically advanced had to have helped them remove all that rock and all that dirt and move it to where it's not anywhere near that mountain.
Yeah, and cut those lines so well.
The top of the mountain is gone. And it's not just one mountain,
flat.
It's like 3 of them.
Right.
That'd be like if you and I were to go up to, say, Mount McKinley or one of the large mountains and cut the top off. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do with it? Once we have the technology to cut it off, where are we going to take it? That's the point. And there is no sign of any great, huge piles of loose rock.
No man-made mountains of any kind.
No, it's all gone. So where did it go?
Yep.
So there is a theory out there that the possibility that all this rock was mined. The stuff that was taken away was utilized by a different race or species altogether. Now, if they were assisted by something that had the technology to fly, to create these giant geoglyphs, perhaps this species that had the ability to fly also weren't from here. I know that's a speculation, but if they weren't from here, they would have possibly the ability to eliminate all that rock.
Sure.
And all that dirt. Mm-hmm. And take it and use it for some reason maybe they needed to use it for. It's just an idea. And I thought I'd put it out there. Okay. Tommy, should we segue into our second half?
Sure. I just had a couple of final thoughts about the Nazca lines and these two peoples. To me, it seems like if you're going to go that far and create something that's going to cost that much of your resources and your manpower and even the lives of your people, you're either doing it for religious reasons because you're worshiping a god. You're either doing it because you're trying to communicate with something that's in the sky. And again, these people had no concept of flight whatsoever. Or in the third one, you're trying to scare something away. You're trying to create a show of force that this is what we have. Do not mess with us, kind of thing. And again, from something that's only can see it from the sky.
Right. And the fact that it has lasted so very long, and that the local populations are now using it, believe it or not, to draw tourism to their area because it's such an arid climate. They don't really have much to give to the outside world.
Not a lot of water parks there.
Not a lot of water parks, and they're basically surviving on little to no vegetation. So
right.
But
that's an interesting. You make an interesting point right there, though. Think about it. If they're barely getting by in the modern era with being able to feed their population and have an economy and all that, imagine how much more difficult it must have been right around the time of Christ, which is when all this basically happened.
Right. So how did they feed their population back then?
Right.
But it seems to me like they had many more animals and perhaps even a sea close by, because why would they represent an orca, a killer whale, or a regular whale in their lines unless they were exposed to those type of creatures?
They must have been to the coast at some point.
Or they were close by a body of water at one point, and the Nazca plains were covered by water at a certain point, or at least part of the plains were. And that's why you've got the whale and stuff like that symbolized. And I hear that on the plain there is actually a geoglyph of a dolphin. So they have seen sea creatures back at the time of the Nazca. So, and what about the llama? I mean, that llama geoglyph that was just discovered looks like a modern day llama. So it shows you how ancient certain species are. I mean, llamas, I didn't know they went back that far. Now I do. It's very incredible the information we're getting out of the actual geoglyphs that are being found in Nazca and outside Nazca.
They sort of tell a story in a way.
Yeah, they tell a good story. Okay. Survivor Girl says, I think they did have the concept of flight, possibly. What if the earth was salted there and nothing would grow? That is very possible. That the ground there is a basalt rock. Perhaps that's why it's white.
What if they got hit by a tidal wave?
That could be too. Maybe they are wiped off by some type of wave. That could be. Maybe that's why a lot of the geoglyphs ended up being on the sides of mountains instead of on the flat plain. And maybe the ones on the flat plain, according to, well, that's actual, because the Paracas people did the geoglyphs on the sides of the mountains, and that was prior to the ones being found on Nazca Plain. So if the Nazca Plain was underwater when the Paracas people did it on the side of the mountains, because they couldn't do it on the plain because it was covered in water. So that could very well be the case. That could very good point there, Tommy. Very good point. So welcome, Jax. Good to see you. Paranormal Underworld is in the chat. We want to welcome him to the live stream. Survivor Girl's here. Mike Johnson's here. And Diane Moore was here. I was talking to her earlier. Okay, we are going to segue into our second part. Our second part this evening is UFOs and extraterrestrials depicted through fine art. I have a video clip I want to play. Let's see if I can cue this up. Share screen. Your audio. Here we go. Oh, another commercial. Sorry, guys. Hold on.
Would you risk
Did ancient artists leave us clear signs of otherworldly interference in our lives and in our culture? Art can be considered a record of history, culture, and science as it reveals man in his many aspects, offering a more complete insight and a unique viewpoint. Since the beginning of man, humans have always felt a need to reproduce celestial events, first on the walls of caves and then on canvas. It is not the case that history, art, archaeology, and anthropology were rewritten in art, but these interpretations should be viewed in light of new elements whose existence had not previously been suspected. Much has been written about the representation of strange objects placed in the sky in works of art, such as this disc in the sky behind the Madonna and Child, where a man and his dog are looking up at the sky and seeing what appears to be a disc. But little has been written about some ancient tapestries of the medieval period, and what has been discussed is controversial because it challenges the orthodox opinion and perspectives. So keep an open mind and take a look at what I have to present, because these paintings suggest that we have been visited several hundred years in advance of today. This ancient fresco is entitled Crucifixion of Christ, painted in 1350 in 3 parts. The wall mural by an unknown artist can be found in the Visoki Dekani Monastery in Kosovo. 2 odd-looking objects with pilots can be seen in the sky on both sides of Jesus. There are many explanations for what these symbols represent, but most people like to believe that they are spacecraft. Check them out. In this image, painted in 1710 by Ert de Gelder, showing a disc-shaped object shining 4 beams of light down on John the Baptist, considered by scholars to be a very convincing UFO encounter, and entitled The Baptism of Christ, is very compelling evidence, to say the least, that we have had UFO encounters going back at least 300 years or more. In this painting, which was painted in the 1500s by an unknown painter, represents what appears to be a satellite, metallic satellite of sorts, with 2 antennae sitting on the clouds between Jesus and the Apostle Peter. Check it out. What's really interesting is that most of these paintings were commissioned by the church. So the church knew ahead of time what they were going to allow or not allow in each painting. So if there was a UFO included into the painting, the church was well aware of it and allowed it. Here's a medieval tapestry showing what appears to be 2 black discs up in the upper left-hand corner flying above the people. The date is suggested that it's closer to about the 1200s, so the 13th century. Check it out. This painting is entitled The Annunciation with Saint Emitius, circa 1486. This is an altarpiece painted by Italian artist Carlo Crivelli, designed to celebrate the announcement by the angel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary that she would become Mother of Jesus. Some theories suggest that the halo of the Holy Spirit depicted in the top left shining down a beam of light is actually a UFO. This painting is found in the Svetishove Cathedral and is a fresco which was painted in the 1600s. A 17th century painting of the crucifixion of Jesus, which can be found in the cathedral in Mesquite, Georgia, shows two saucer-shaped craft on either side of Jesus. Check it out. Here's another medieval painting suggesting flying saucers being in the presence of the Pope during a papal visit, showing that the church was fully aware of UFOs being around and being depicted in tapestries and frescoes. These kind of represent what appears to be flying or floating rocks or stones, but they still kind of have that disc-shaped appearance. So perhaps the artist was trying to hide them in his painting so the church wouldn't know. It's always a possibility. Here's another medieval tapestry from 1201 AD depicting a black flying disc circling over the city. Check it out. In this unknown piece of work, we see what appears to be three angels holding some type of sacred relic beneath what appears to be a dome-shaped, unidentified flying object with lights around the center and a light on top. What do you think? Could the beings with the halos actually be spacemen wearing space helmets and wearing different uniforms to signify their status on the ship? In this painting, we have what appears to be a young gentleman looking up at the sky and seeing a flying humanoid. Now, is this an angel representation, or is this actually a flying humanoid in the sense of an alien being? It is yet to be determined since it's such an unknown piece, and due to the fact that it's from the 1300s. In the 1500s, once the church did not have the market cornered on art and artists began commonly painting for private citizens or even for themselves, artist Hans Glaser made a wonderful woodcut of a sky filled with different shapes of objects. Again, there were discs. There were also long tubes, bulbous crosses, and arcing streaks. This woodcut looked far stranger than anything seen in earlier paintings, but it depicted a scene that many people saw above Nuremberg, Germany. They saw tubes and crosses beginning to fight one another and shoot fire at each other as if there was a space battle occurring. And then a large black pointed arrow-shaped vehicle came down and all the other vehicles left the airspace. Could this have been an alien battle? Very possible. At least that's what the scholars of ufology tend to believe. Here we have another painting suggesting the possibility of a satellite sitting between the archangels up on the clouds above the heavenly host, circa 1128 AD. Check it out. Here's another woodblock cut or print circa 1045 AD over Rouen, France, depicting what appears to be a battle or the presence of several disc or orb-shaped craft in the skies. Check it out. Could this legitimately indicate another UFO encounter? And here again is another representation of the crucifixion of Jesus, showing two flying saucers at the base of the cross flying away. Do you think that UFOs were present at the crucifixion? These paintings seem to indicate yes. In this painting from the Renaissance period, we have what appears to be an ornate. I want to stop it here because we've been talking in the chat about the possibility of people in Nazca having a woven balloon filled with hot air. According to this Renaissance piece of artwork, here is a woven balloon supposedly elevated by hot air, and during the Renaissance period there was no known technology in regards to balloons. So I just wanted to point this out. This is a very old piece of artwork, and let's get back to the video. Ornate balloon, or perhaps even an orb-shaped vehicle. What do you think? This image is of Saint Wolfgang and the Devil, painted by Michael Pache in the 15th century. Many believe the winged creature is an alien rather than the devil. Check it out. The winged being kind of represents what appears to be an Anunnaki, a possible winged alien life form that visited Earth early on. But it is hard to determine whether this is a demon or an alien. But art scholars still wonder till today. In this religious fresco from the Renaissance period, we see what appears to be a flying egg-shaped craft with Jesus sitting on something in the middle, reaching out to the people below. In this fresco, painted in 1307, we see what appears to be a scalloped-edged disc floating above a building. This image was located in a German church. After the last invasion attempt of Japan by Genghis Khan in 1281, a UFO of sorts was found floating in the bay or off the coastline of Japan.
This is a representation of that UFO, along with a Japanese man holding a box that was found inside the craft.
I have to stop the video here. This image of the alleged UFO on the right is considered the oldest known UFO depicted through artwork. And the gentleman on the left, and it is a man holding a box. The box was supposedly found within the craft, along with a female that was present in the craft that had no language that could be deciphered by any of the regional languages. And she didn't look exactly like the Japanese people. She had a different look to her. So let's go on from here.
Here is another representation of the same vehicle. Perhaps it looks a little larger in this image, but it still shows the Japanese man holding the box, and you can see the markings on the vehicle. Is this an extraterrestrial craft that was found off the coastline of Japan? Who knows, but it occurred in the 1200s AD. Here you can see them both side by side to make a comparison. And here's another representation of the same event. Same craft with the same grills up on the top part of the craft and the stripes down below. Check it out. And the same Japanese man holding a box.
The reason why I know this is a Japanese man is because Japanese women wore their hair up. Japanese men of this period wore it down. This is a Japanese man holding a box.
And yet again here, the same event is represented. Remember, these woodblock prints are from the 1200s or the 13th century. They cannot be proven or disproven either way, but it sure appears to be a UFO or extraterrestrial encounter of some kind.
So what do you think of that, Tommy? What is your impression of that video clip?
Well, first of all, Tim, I thought it was wonderfully done. Very nice video. That was just excellent. Yeah, that was really pulled that one off. That looks great. I've always been very curious as to the depiction of UFOs in literature because there's so much of it. I mean, again, we're talking about people that if they had the concept of flight, it wasn't something that they ever thought that, you know, that they would ever be doing. Okay. And the fact that these things look like saucers or the space battles on those wood carvings, that's amazing, you know, and there's just too much of it out there to dismiss it as offhandedly, just as, oh, well, it's a blob of paint or whatever. I mean, these guys, they basically painted or drew or carved what they saw for the most part. Now you've got, your Renaissance guys that were like really religious and they're putting angels out there on everything. But other than that, some of this stuff is very, very compelling. It's like, what made you see? What did you see to make you, want to paint that? I mean, and a guy pointing up in the sky at something. I mean, it's just bizarre,
And remember, the one thing I found out is all these early medieval paintings and tapestries, and especially the Renaissance paintings, were approved by the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so the church would approve what would go in the painting. They would have once they get their first look at the painting, and they'd say, well, let's see, do we want that in the painting? Do we want to release this to the public? Kind of like how journalists do it now with their production assistant or their person that looks over the article before they release it to the public. They were doing the same with the church, and the church knew full well what they were releasing. So that Madonna and Child painting that is very famous, with the man standing on the hill next to his dog looking up at what looks like a disc, a flying saucer, could very well have been that. And that the church was saying, hey, we approve this. More or less, they're saying, look, it's real, and it was happening back then. So imagine what is happening now.
I hate to be the skeptic on that, and it's a great point, and it could have very well be that way. But the other side of that could be that these guys wanted to put those things that they're seeing in the sky in their paintings, and when they went to the church was like, "What's that? Oh, that's an angel. That's an angel right there. Oh, that represents an angel." Maybe that's how they got away with it.
That could be possibly the case, because, like, for instance, that one painting I had up there that showed it looked like floating rocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the person that put those in there made them look like rocks instead of making them look like discs.
And a couple of them do. A couple of them, that's the thing, that especially in the center, I noticed one that looked, pretty much like a classic flying saucer.
Yeah, exactly. There
amazing.
Are a couple of them that did, and then the rest of them looked like stones.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, well, perhaps they're trying to hide it from the church.
Right.
That was an actual church painting of a papal visit. Mm-hmm. So that was that was indicative of someone trying to hide something in that painting. Yeah, I would say so.
I did have one other thought, and I'm not really a big believer in UFOs or time travelers from the future or whatever. I'm not really big into that theory myself, though I do recognize that it's out there and it's as valid as any other, in my opinion. But think about it. If you were, let's say, an archaeologist from the future, and you had the ability to travel backward in time, these would be pretty good places to go. I mean, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, if you could sit above the crucifixion and, with a camera on it and actually watch it as it happened only in the past. I mean, again, I'm not saying that's what it is, but I mean, there are theories out there, and,
I do believe, Survivor Girl, that some paintings were found later on that were unapproved by the church. But there were some, like the Madonna and Child, specifically the Madonna and Child, the one that we all refer to as a guy standing on a hill looking at a disc. I mean, that's widely accepted as the explanation. That was approved by the church. And that has been confirmed by scholars. So in some cases, like the one I showed toward the end of the video, where it showed like a scalloped, flat scalloped object that was above a building with red shutters and white pillars, that was thought to be a disc, but it could have been something else. It just appeared to be a classic disc with a scalloped edge. Now, that was not approved by the church, but yet it was found on a fresco inside a church. So that could have been another person hiding something.
Well, that's an angel. That's an angel right there. That's what that is.
Or perhaps that's a demon. Who knows? Or maybe we made a fancy cloud, so whatever. but there is a lot of evidence to indicate that throughout the Nazca lines, throughout the geoglyphs, along the mountain edges, throughout the paintings, that we have most definitely been visited along the way. I do have one more clip. It's called NASA Asked to Investigate 10,000-Year-Old Rock Paintings of UFOs and Extraterrestrials, and I'd like to play that clip. It's 3 minutes long, so if you can bear with us, I think it's a good one. So let's see here. I'm going to cue it up, Tommy. Let's do share screen. Okay, let me make it full screen. And here we go. All righty.
Mysterious ancient rock paintings could show depictions of advanced aliens who visited our ancestors around 10,000 years ago, according to staggering claims. The paintings, found in Kerala, India, have been said by some to show aliens and UFOs, similar to how they are depicted in sci-fi movies. According to local archaeologist J.R. Boggatt, it is unclear as to what the images were supposed to be of. He said, the findings suggest that humans in prehistoric times may have seen or imagined beings from other planets, which still create curiosity among people and researchers, dailastar.co.uk reports. Local government in the area is seeking the help of the US and Indian space agencies. Extensive research is needed for further findings. Kerala presently doesn't have any such expert who could give clarity on the subject. The expert also said some of the other features of the paintings were unclear and the characters appeared to be wielding weapons. He added, the paintings are done in natural colors that have hardly faded despite the years. The strangely carved figures are seen holding weapon-like objects and do not have clear features. Especially, the nose and mouth are missing. In few pictures, they are even shown wearing spacesuits. We can't refute possibility of imagination by prehistoric men, but humans usually fancy such things. The narrator said archaeologists have contacted NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, to help solve the mystery. There is a popular ancient alien theory our ancestors were visited by an advanced race of aliens that helped them build great monuments such as the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge. This is due to question marks about how primitive societies were able to achieve such feats. There are claims of depictions of aliens and UFOs being found in ancient art across the globe, including in Egypt and even Aboriginal rock art in Australia. However, skeptics say that ancient art also includes depictions of dragons and other mythical creatures, and this does not mean they existed. They also argue that humans were often depicted in weird and wonderful ways in rock and other historic artwork.
Okay, those were some cave drawings that were found in Christarg, South America. One thing I want to say about them is they were shown to be what was compared to the typical gray on the cave wall. When you saw that group of aliens clustered together that were drawn like with gold and ochre colors, the folklore of the area suggests that people were actually visited. Some were taken away and never returned. So it actually insinuates that abductions were going on at the time in South America when these drawings were created. Yes, Some hallucinogenics were taken in religious events, Survivor Girl, yes, of course. But they were used mainly for healing and for religious events. I don't know about recreational use because I wasn't back there at that time. Some people claim I was, but I was not. Anyways, I would have to say that the fact that we found out that abductions were actually occurring back then lends a lot of credence to the fact that abductions claims nowadays might actually be legitimate in most cases, or in some cases. Let's go that far. We can't say most cases because some people think they're abducted and they can't even make it to the 7-Eleven.
Right. Just
so
bad bottle of tequila.
Right, bad bottle of tequila, whatever. But there are people that do believe they're being abducted, and they're legitimate folks like you and I, people that go to work, pay their taxes, have ordinary lives. And there's even people that have spectacular lives, people that are actors and actresses, people that are politicians that are actually being abducted. So just finding this out through those cave paintings is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Great source of information. If you're interested in any of this information, just Google new aliens found, 10,000-year-old aliens. These pictures are 10,000 years old. Okay, 10,000-year-old aliens found in South America. Google that and you'll get more advanced information than what I'm presenting here. But I just wanted to touch base on that so that you could see that history goes back farther than I can even imagine. And in history, there are accounts of UFOs. There are accounts of extraterrestrial visitation. There are accounts of people being taken and not being returned. There are accounts of a lot of different things occurring. Now, whether this is attributed to hallucinations, I can't say. But the evidence indicates otherwise. The evidence indicates that it was a legitimate occurrence and that it happened to many different civilizations. So I hope you enjoyed our live stream. Tommy, I want to thank you for presenting the Nazca lines.
My pleasure as always.
I want to thank everybody in the chat room for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to continue with possibly doing a more in-depth study of individual pieces of art or drawings. That was a suggestion by Survivor Girl in the chat. And yes, we are going to do that in the future. So please check back on our channel, the UFO Man, to see when that will be. I want to thank Alicia Gross and Petra Fagan and Survivor Girl and Diane Moore and Mike and everyone that came today. We really appreciate your patronage to our live stream, and we hope you return again soon. So, Tommy, you got any last words?
Well, I just think that there's so much, there's so many, let's just say, sky anomalies in literature and rather art over the in history that there's just so much of it that it's almost impossible to ignore or deny that these guys were painting what they saw, and otherwise they wouldn't have put it there. I mean, again, who knew anything could fly back and that wasn't a bird? But I just think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot more going on here than we understand. And if we keep pushing and keep moving forward, I think that we'll all come to, more answers together. I would like to thank everybody for coming. Myself, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Listen, I do have a new YouTube channel. It's called Tommy Highway TV. If politics is your thing, I would really appreciate some subs. So if you guys could go over there and sub that for me, check out my videos. And if you like them, go ahead and hit that like button. That would be awesome. Other than that, as many of you know, I am an author, and you can find my books, my work over at TommyHighway.com. Thanks again.
Also, if you get a chance, subscribe to his channel.
Please.
And please subscribe to mine. All the help in the world, all the subs and all the likes help out greatly.
Yes, they do.
Thank you very much for coming, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.